Good evening. I'm Scott J. Hamilton, and welcome to the Hamilton Report. I'm delighted that you are with us this evening on the 25th day of January. What a fast month this has been. A lot of history that we have lived through this month. I read an interesting piece today on how educators are actually teaching about history that's being made as we live and breathe. And it's an exciting time, and I'm grateful to be on this side of last week. Last week began with a challenge and ended with a flurry of very good things. And so congratulations to President Biden, Vice President Harris, on starting to do the work right away that they promised to do. Want to mention a couple of things before I introduce our guest this evening. One is Alicia Andrews, Oklahoma Democratic Party chair, was yesterday on Sunday, was the guest on Flashpoint on KFOR here in Oklahoma City. And if you have not yet seen that, here's a link where you can go and check that out. It's a great show, and I think that you will be proud of being a Democrat if you check out that broadcast. And we want to thank our friends at KFOR for inviting Alicia to be on that show. Also, we are getting lots and lots of calls in the office about people who want to help, they want to volunteer, they want to contribute their time and their money. And to all of you, I say very, very special thanks. We appreciate that. And although we're still remaining socially distant, we are still taking all precautions necessary. We are employing new ways to incorporate volunteers into our work, and we need volunteers. So I encourage you to visit the Oklahoma Democratic Party website. It's simply okdemocrats.org. While you're there, you can sign up to volunteer. You can make a monthly contribution, or you can also check out previous episodes of this broadcast, and as well as our Chair's Daily Live update. Both of those are available 24 hours a day on our website, also on our Facebook page, and you can check us out on YouTube at okdemocrats.org/YouTube. So that's enough announcements right now. Instead of continuing to talk by myself, I'm pleased to introduce my guest this week. He is District 5 Councilor in Tulsa, and we're very, very happy to welcome Mykey Arthrell to the broadcast. Mykey, welcome.
Thanks, Scott. Glad to be here.
This is it's a pleasure talking with you. You and I met very, very briefly in a rush of things on election night, but we knew on election night that you had won this position, and so it's good to see you again now that you've had a little time to get settled into your counselor's role. I'm really happy that you could make some time to join us this evening. I know between your job and being a city councilor and a dad, you're a busy man. So thank you for sharing the time with us this evening. I want to talk a little bit about your experience. You grew up in Tulsa, and then you left Tulsa, and like many folks, you returned back to a city that you care for very deeply. In that process, what was it that made you decide to head back home to Tulsa?
So my roots here in Tulsa go deep. I have always been very involved in the Unitarian Church here. That was a big part of my upbringing, and my family is very involved politically. My dad actually ran for House District 77 as a Democrat. That was quite a controversial. He won, then lost, then they just muted the results because it was like within one vote, and certification ended up making it too close for a courtroom to decide, so they just deferred to the regular election because this was a special election they were doing. So there was a lot of history here. This is a place that I definitely became myself and blossomed in myself. You have when you have a community of support like I had here, and what feels like legacy, you are always attached. Obviously, like so many teens wanting to get out of Oklahoma as soon as I could was on the top of my list. So I moved to Washington, having never been there before, with some friends, one from Shreveport and one from Dallas Fort Worth. But I found my wife. I had my first daughter, Millicent, in Tacoma, and then we ended up moving to Austin, and then finally settling back here in Tulsa. So there was a journey there.
You've done a progressive march through the United States, it sounds like. In your travels, where you've lived, what are the things that have really stood out for you, and things that you have brought back to your governing here in Oklahoma?
Well, I have always been someone who serves. I was in Boy Scouts. I worked at my church, even in childcare. So I started volunteering in the Northwest at a suicide hotline when I was 18, and working at a Y as a preschool teacher. So, those skills of active listening and are really founded in this principle that people, when they're autonomous, make decisions they can follow through with. They make decisions they feel confident in. That the best way to help someone is to listen. And that was radical thinking to me. This idea that I don't have the answers for everyone, that I don't I can't give advice or just walk people through what they're supposed to do. I really need to walk with them. And those are things that I brought here in my work. Originally, my first job back here in Tulsa was working with homeless youth at a drop-in center. And then I became the shelter coordinator at Youth Services of Tulsa. And so I've always worked with youth. I'm currently the education specialist with Urban Strategies, Inc. For the redevelopment of the West Side in Tulsa. It's a HUD grant through the Choice Neighborhood Initiative. So that's always been my work, and my passion is working with children in education and helping those that want it.
I really admire that so much. Your daughters, if I recall correctly, are in public school in Tulsa. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're actually going to enroll them again. So during the pandemic, my wife is a teacher as well, and so she has a Nature Explorers program. So we allowed them to homeschool through this with her, because outdoor education has been a really safe way. She hasn't had any positive cases in her classes, and although it's like a part-time curriculum, it definitely has given them a lot of opportunity to learn here in our backyard. So right now there's open enrollment, and we'll be getting them back into public school. They both want to go back as soon as they can be in person. Just the limitations of distance learning with a school district that has no experience with it was going to be insurmountable in some ways.
I understand that. I want to take a look at a quote. This is from you. It says, "My work in the community has allowed me to see the struggles that too many residents of the city must contend with, and how those struggles are connected to the way we govern." And as you were talking about walking with people and really understanding the challenges that folks face in their daily lives, I was really taken by that quote, because it seems to me that truly is something that you live by, getting to know people and understand what their needs are. I want to take a look at what is your district. You are smack in the middle of Tulsa. You are bordered by so many different districts. And tell me a little bit about what that means in terms of working across those district lines with other counselors in Tulsa.
Yeah, in a practical way, it means that we're actually trying to always just think about our residents when we're making decisions. So we get a lot of complaints. Even early on when I was going to neighborhood meetings, you hear things about that house where there's 20 people living in it. And, that's why we need police. And so you have this conversation and you unravel it a little. Let's unpack that. You have 20 people living in a house. Why is that? Is there affordable housing in our district? Is there not? When people end up being, in places of desperation of having to live like with 20 people, you end up making alliances, and there's sort of trauma bonds that happen with folks. And that's, no one chooses homelessness or chooses to live like that, but you definitely make the best of it, and people have coping skills that will walk them through it. So then you get to talk about volunteering in the community and making sure. That's why it's important that we have housing that people can live in. And I mean, we just recently had a conversation with many councilors around the districts about the massage parlors, and the legislation that was passed really was about registering masseuses to make sure that they're regulated. But that does nothing for people who just open up shop and then can continue to just pack their establishments with people who will be taken advantage of or who are vulnerable, which could be immigrants, which could be people that have a legitimate skill set that didn't get in the business to be sexually exploited, but because of racism, they're going to be targeted. And so we're working right now at the council to come up with an ordinance that is going to target human traffickers more, the people who might own these establishments, and make everyone just accountable, not just targeting the victims. And so there's a lot of things until you've worked with people on the front lines who are experiencing this and desperate to make a life for themselves, and they're put in these hard situations. You don't realize what the real problem is and what those real solutions should look like.
Let's go back a little bit, Mikey. This was your second run for office. What are some of the things that you learned from your first outing that influenced the way that you ran the election that landed you in the seat right now? What are some of those things? And I'm asking because now is the time when people are really starting to think about, is this the right time for me to consider running for office? What did you learn from your first campaign?
Well, in some ways, my naivete helped, because I didn't know to look for endorsements. I didn't know how to fundraise necessarily. All I knew was how to connect with people. And I didn't have a bunch of volunteers. So what I ended up doing was knocking doors. And eventually my dad taught me how to pull a list from Van and then become my own political scientist and figure out who I should be targeting and come up with my own strategy. And all that allowed me to connect with people, and then gave me those talking points. It gave me the things to say in interviews. It fueled the conversations with donors. And so much of it really also comes on election day, you realize, comes down to luck. Who made the mistakes? Who didn't pick a strategy that wasn't gonna make a difference. All I spent money on was like flyers and signs, and that's at its core, that's really all you need in a council race. This one was a race with no incumbent, so it was an open field. I decided to run not because I really wanted to get into politics, but because I had two very conservative folks in the paper as saying they both wanted to be my counselor, and neither of which had any views that really aligned with me. And knowing that I am someone who knows how to relate to people and talk to people, I thought I'd be in a good position to get the votes necessary to win the council seat. I did lose that first time, though. We didn't even get to that. It was it came down to about 400 vote difference. And he had every endorsement. The person I was running against, it was actually two races. That's how they often break down when you don't have like a primary. It's just a general election, and then if no one gets 50%, it goes to a runoff, and that's what ended up happening in my case. So you're running essentially two elections against the same people, not like a Democratic primary and then a general.
And we should point out that you did this in a year where you really could not knock doors successfully. How did you engage with voters in your district, given all the restrictions of COVID?
So the second time, so I was talking about 2018 just then, and now 2 years later, our incumbent had made some very bad decisions about voting against a mask ordinance, And even before that, he just started blocking people. And so I got, people asking me to run. Once again, my strength is going to be door knocking and talking to people. That's what I do for my job. It felt like something that I could do safely. When you go into the CDC's guidelines, I'm masked, I'm outside, I'm over 6 feet away. I check the boxes. And honestly, as a Democrat, I got a lot of heat for it. There's a lot of Democrats who don't feel like that was appropriate. Actually, someone who I was running against threw me under the bus before about, how they're very cautious about COVID and respectful. But I mean, I think we saw as a nation, the Democratic Party lost a lot of House and Senate seats in places that they might have gained them if they were to have stayed with the ground game. Obviously, in a presidential election, it makes sense. We don't need to do the ground game. I think Biden was on point with rolling that back. But when you're talking about local elections, you're not getting into their living room on their TV. You're not getting them through the mailbox. Another Democrat I was running against had spent twice as much as me on mailers, and they ended up coming in fourth, and votes when it came down to it, because they didn't knock any doors, and that's really what it takes. So what you don't really get people yelling at you. I called actually a Republican who I knew was knocking doors, Kiden Creekbaum, who I was in Boy Scouts with. And I asked him how it went, because he had said he had knocked 5,000 doors. And he said out of those 5,000, he had only 6 people who were upset with him. So that's pretty good odds. And so that's what I decided to do.
And you're talking about something that's critical for local elections, and that is knocking on people's doors, talking to them one-on-one. And we know that that's one area that we need volunteers for. Picking a candidate, working with that candidate, getting to understand who he or she is and what they're all about, and then being able to call their friends, to knock on doors in their community. Were you successful the second time in building a volunteer base?
Oh, yes. I think that the name recognition that I built from the first time around put me in position where volunteers were coming to me. I wasn't having to chase anyone down. I never had to go knock alone. I always had a driver. We'd crack the windows. We were both wearing masks. I know that's a higher risk thing. I always, if I had any symptoms or they had, we'd cancel it, and not knock that day. But that was something that John Waldron has what coached me on. He said that's how you have to do it. And you end up hitting about 3 times as many doors if you have someone driving you to those doors, and you're very selective about which ones you take. So the volunteers at the end of the day ended up winning for me. They took all the places I couldn't knock. They were doing the door hangers. Some of them felt comfortable, like my mom felt comfortable knocking because she's very familiar with me, and people who got to know me. That if you really want to knock, you have to get to know the candidate, so that when you're talking, you can be honest. And that's the biggest deal when you're face to face talking about the issues, is you can't hide or try and cover up anything. It's really important to be open and transparent and vulnerable. Because that's, despite how you might line up with that person answering the door, that respect you get from acknowledging that there's someone that you are going to be honest with and someone that you can be vulnerable with is huge. And I think at the end of the day, that won a lot of people over, even if I have a different opinion than them. Often those opinions are about things that have nothing to do with the city. That was another interesting thing, is people don't like to stay in the lane of city council. They want to talk about national issues, and they want to talk about the president. And I can be open and honest with them. I'm not going to avoid their question, but after I answer it, I can let them know that my views have nothing to do with my practice as city councilor, and get back to talking about how I would serve them.
That's really smart. And one of our viewers, Lindsay Holt Reyes, says that her husband is running for school board zone 1 for Union Public Schools. and they did a test run knocking on doors over the weekend, and it went well. So she's appreciative of that input. Speaking of input, what advice would you give to someone who has never run for office before, but feels compelled because of the political landscape in their town or their city or in the state of Oklahoma right now, that they're really giving it some serious thought? What advice would you give them just in that decision-making process?
Well, I think you have to be prepared to find out who you are. That's something you learn. Are you going to be someone who goes negative? Are you going to be someone who's gets tied up in knots when people bring stuff out about you? How are you going to respond to questions and all that? You got to be ready for that, because you do learn a lot about yourself in the process. It also, what's at stake? What are you really putting on the line? Are you going to be okay with the outcome regardless? You really can't be attached to outcomes when you're running for office. You can do all the footwork in the world and still not win, but that's the will of the people, and that's the important thing. Like for me, it was about participation, engagement, and I think that's it's a relief either way on election day, when you've done everything you can and you know that you've encouraged participation. And the races that I was able to be a part of, we were able to bring Democrats to vote in August. That never happens. We don't have a lot of runoffs for Democrats in August. Usually that's a Republican date for Republicans to show up and have their runoffs, because Democrats get decided in June. There's rarely a chance for them to run off, but council elections in Tulsa have moved to August, and that it was a 2-to-1. Like for me, that was part of the motivation too, is how do I get people to show up on a date that a Democrat would have never thought they'd have to vote. And so that was a huge part of it.
You said something that I think is rather profound. You said you cannot be attached to outcomes. Of course, everyone wants to win their election, but you did not give up the first time. You stayed involved. You stayed committed to your city, and I think for some people that would be a hard thing. Talk a little bit about what that was like for you and how you were able just to keep pushing on with your life, and then decided to run again.
So by luxury, putting everything I could into it, knowing that I didn't have the endorsements or all the money. I think I spent $4,000 the first time around. It wasn't a lot of money, but I still got within 400 votes of someone who was an establishment. I mean, they weren't an incumbent, but they got every endorsement. They got all the PAC money. They ran a very partisan race, and they went negative. So despite all of that, what was encouraging to me was people who I talked to voted for me. The people who I reached responded, and that's all I could ask for. But it was a relief not to have to work a job and be a city councilor and all that. You can't help but, for me anyway, to feel like, oh, good, I don't have to do this really hard thing. Great. Like, I know that seems weird, but I was open to that. I was really, I was like, I'm doing this because it's important. I think we need to. However, it will be a relief if I don't as well. I'm not scared for the job. I mean, so far I've loved being able to do this and bring myself to it, but it's because I'm bringing my authentic self to it. I'm not bringing the establishment form of me or figure that someone was trying to present to the public, or that I was trying to present to the public. I've always been me. And the fact that I was able to win now against an incumbent and there was dark money. There was probably 80 grand worth of dark money put into city council races in Tulsa, and they went just outlandish lies, painting me as an evil, get out of jail free monopoly man and other things. Pictures my favorite pictures on Facebook of me in a field of flowers, going free, but turning it against me and making it evil, or who's behind the mask, because I would wear a mask in some of my pictures I'd put out. I feel bulletproof now. And I think that's an amazing feeling too. Like, I ran as myself, I ran authentically, and no matter, what I'm facing in office, I get to continue to be myself. I won't be torn. I won't be, put in hard positions. Sorry. Because I get to make decisions that, are predictable. Because I've never changed who I am. I won't be holding up anyone's agenda or worried about what people think, because they elected me despite all that.
And I think that in itself is some mighty fine advice, because ultimately, at the end of the day, a candidate who becomes an office holder still has to go home to themselves at night, and recognizing who you are and who you are deep inside, I think is very important. But I want to just get this question in, because it's clearly an important one. Two of our viewers are asking tonight, are there practical solutions that are being offered for the homeless veteran population in Tulsa? Angela Utley and Amber Jensen both asked similar questions.
Well, and funny enough, there are. And there's resistance on the council to it, which is kind of funny. I think the council might come through in the end, but there's an organization, and it's going to be in the planning committee, in front of the planning committee, I believe tomorrow, or it might be the Wednesday after next. I'll have to check. But it's an organization for vets that does the housing, and they take over Crown Plazas and hotels and kind of convert them into mental health facilities as well as housing. What's hard is that it's in an area that, because not everyone's very selective with Section 8. A lot of places can decide not to do it, and they feel like that somehow makes them a better establishment when they don't, and it leads to other places kind of being inundated with them when they do. And so this particular part of town is inundated with places that accept Section 8, and no wonder why. It's there's a Walmart there, so there's food and access to it. There's a lot of service industry jobs for people to be able to work. And to me, that's what matters. When you're looking at putting a place like a housing for vets, the important things are there jobs around? Is there food around? Those should be the boxes we check. But apparently places like Walmart and places like even these restaurant owners don't like the idea. And so you're surprised by the resistance you get. And as a city councilor, you have to respect the businesses as well as the services that you need in your community.
Absolutely. But I mean, we talk so much about honoring our vets, and wow, that's got to be a tough one, because I think I would just be jumping up and down over anyone that resisted that. I understand people don't want social services in their backyards, but
they don't realize the solution isn't reducing the number of Section 8 units; it's increasing it.
Yes.
And that's a paradigm that people don't shift. Like, oh, the problem isn't that there's not enough; or that there's too many. It's that there's not enough. And we needed everyone to start accepting these vouchers, and then there wouldn't be concentrated populations.
Well, I'll tell you something. I admire your work on this, and it's clearly something that is on the minds of our viewers. And I'm going to ask that you keep us posted on the progress there, as well as other things that are going on. This has been a quick half hour. The time has gone by very quickly. But I want to thank you for giving us some time this evening. And as things progress throughout the year and things move forward in Tulsa, and Tulsa is always moving forward, I'm going to ask that you keep us informed and you come back and visit with us. Is that a deal?
It's a deal, Scott. Thank you.
Councilor Mykey Arthrell from the Tulsa City Council has been our guest this evening, and what a pleasure it was talking with him. And it's a pleasure having you with us this evening. Again, I tell you this every week, but there would be no reason for me to be here on a Monday night if it weren't for you. And I appreciate the fact that you want these deeper dives on topics and issues and people that we just don't have time to get to in our daily lives. So thank you for joining us. I hope that you will share this program with your friends every Monday night at 7 o'clock as we are here. And I thank you especially for being with us tonight. One last thing. Next Monday is our chair, Alicia Andrews' birthday, and she has asked for one thing for her birthday, and that is that we all register 10 people to vote by February 1st. Just do a mental checklist of people in your family who may or may not be registered, and ask them. If they're not, give them an opportunity. We can help you with that. Just let us know what you need, and we will be happy to do that, because the more people we register to vote, the better off it's going to be for all of us in the days to come. Again, thank you for being with us. I'll look forward to seeing you next week right here. Until then, please take very good care of yourself and those that you love. There's still a lot of danger, so protect yourself well. Take good care. We'll see you next time. On behalf of all of us here at the Hamilton Report and the Oklahoma Democratic Party, I'm Scott J. Hamilton. Good night.